Yeah.
So I think you've already talked about this a little bit, but besides your studies, did you need to do like any specific training, or since you're not working directly with the police department, but
No, it was just more of my clinical training. I think what might have helped as well is I worked at the RCMP as a civilian member
okay.
for
Mhm.
about 14 years. So I came into contact
Wow.
with a lot of police officers. So I became more familiar with what their roles are. And I think as a clinician, I think
Mhm.
really understanding what their jobs are, what they experience, what the culture is like, I think that really helps um, for you to become like a better clinician with these types of population because it is different. Like
Mhm.
their trauma is not, we go through the PTSD diagnostic, and people can have trauma, but if you're a first responder, it's a little bit different because
Yeah.
the culture
Yeah.
culture really plays a role as well. So I think you really need to understand
Yeah.
kind of their environment.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, great. And about the problems that police officers that like they have, could you talk about it a little? So what are the problems that they are dealing with actually?
Yeah, well, in terms of their jobs, right? They're always dealing with the worst of people. They're
Yeah.
never really meeting people or having a good day.
Mhm.
So, that kind of can take a real big toll on them if they're constantly uh, being unappreciated, for lack of a better word, right? Because they're constantly
Mhm.
yelled at. There's always the potential for violence. There's always the potential for being hurt. They work long hours, they work long shifts, they don't get a lot of breaks. It's always call to call to call, or they're sitting in a
Mhm.
car forever and not doing anything. So it's kind of like, one of the two extremes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and, the culture is, I think it's still kind of there. It's changing a little bit, but it's really more of the idea of, suck it up. If you're having a bad day, it doesn't matter. It's your job, and you
Yeah.
just got to get through it. Like, don't complain about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and if you get treatment, then you're kind of seen as weak. So there's like that kind of culture really takes a toll, especially
Yeah.
in that kind of job when you do need support and you do need to be able to
Mhm.
talk about what's happened.
Would you be able to give us an example, or you're not allowed to?
No, an example of
A client, like someone who's
yeah.
like having
Well, yeah. So to say, a lot of um, every police officer has always witnessed a lot of traumatic things, right? They'll give you the whole list of, they've been
Mhm.
to shootings and stabbings and suicides and drownings and, a lot of drug overdoses. Like that's just, their normal day.
yeah.
And then if you go to a traffic, if you talk to a um, traffic cop, they a lot of the accidents where people have gone through the windshield or lost legs or people aren't wearing their seatbelts, like they're constantly exposed to violence, and every call they don't know what's going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
Mhm.
that
It's
type
always a
of
surprise.
person, yeah, they always know that there's going to be something.
Yeah.
So they're constantly, like, if you think about adrenaline, right? Their
Yeah.
adrenaline is always going. Like they
Yeah.
always have to be prepared. So there's no downtime for that. And if you go
Mhm.
from work to home and you don't really find a way to release that adrenaline, it just builds up in your body, right? It just builds and builds and builds so that you're, in your home life, for example, you're not engaged as much with your family, right? You don't really
Mhm.
want to go to birthday parties. You don't really want to see people. You don't really and you can't, you feel like you can't really share with your spouse what's happening. So that kind of silence and that kind of being unable to really release that kind of adrenaline and that kind of pressure, it just catches up with them sometimes, right? And it can be
Yeah.
like a lot
Okay.
to handle.